Okay, this is part 2, and here we are on the fourth approach, which is HTML or Flash. And let's take a look at what this is all about. So again, we're still working with that same sample screen. Everything visually looks the same. When I click on the word sufficient, watch what happens here. So just a little HTML pop-up appears, and it has just that term in it. And that's kind of an interesting effect because there's nothing else that's kind of around it. You're just looking at the term. That's all that the person wanted anyway, and there it is right there. It doesn't look very pretty, but you can make it look better with some HTML formatting, and this is just a standard HTML pop-up window. You could make it chromeless as well and do some other tweaking if you know HTML, so it's pretty straightforward. It's just linking out to a standard HTML file. The con here is that the content is being duplicated, so there's some content sitting out in the HTML file for this term. There's also the same content in the glossary for that term. So again, editing would have to occur in two different locations. And the info pop-up is actually Flash. So I've embedded, using Articulate, I've embedded a Flash piece, and there it is here. So I just put it down in the lower right corner. And you can see I roll over and some information pops up. And again, I can make that look anyway. This is just a quick example. You can add sound effects. You can obviously graphically make it look any way that you want. And it contains information. So you get that true mouse over thing going on. And you can add sound effects and all that stuff. So this is nice, but it also requires a knowledge of Flash. You can buy some tools that will make that easier. But you still have manual tweaking and positioning and all that stuff. So it's not really the easiest choice. I think some of the other choices actually are superior to using Flash for this purpose. So so that takes us to the last choice, which is using Engage for this purpose. And what I've done here is I've used an engaged labeled graphic. And I've used the technique that Jeanette had shown last week or earlier this week with a bunch of food items that were in a shelf. And this is the exact same technique where I'm using the master slide. This content is actually now sitting on the master slide, and I've used transparency with the labeled graphic so that these markers are just sitting what appears to be on top of the slide. So nothing visually has changed for the learner, except these markers are animated and they're here and they mean something, so that when I click on a marker, I'm now seeing the term for sufficient. And I click on records and I see that. I click on info and I see a tip with a little sound effect. So you can of course add pictures and format that, lots of options within Engage for that kind of thing. You're also noticing here that I don't have the title bar that you normally would see on an Engage interaction. And that's because I've added some code that I purchased that enables me to remove that bar. So in this case, I didn't want the bar messing with the design that's already here, so I took the extra step to do that, which requires some post-publishing tweaking on my part. But you don't have to do that. If you've incorporated your design to include that title bar that's part of the interaction, then there's nothing else to do. And it's actually quite easy to place these markers on the screen, and it's easy to edit the information. Again, you have duplicated information, so you have the glossary term sufficient in this labeled interaction. You also have that same term in the glossary interaction. So if it changes, there's two locations where you'd have to edit that. But visually, it actually creates a pretty cool effect, and I think it works really well for this purpose. So those are the 5 different kinds of approaches that I've explored, and that there are pros and cons to both. It depends on how much development effort that you want to put in. It also depends on how much maintenance effort that the client wants flexibility to have, and that will help determine your choice of what works best. So hopefully you found that helpful, and if there's any requests, I'll probably do a future screener or two on the steps that I use to create these effects. Thanks.